Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. Let me first thank all of you for being here on a Friday morning. I realize end of the week schedules get pretty crowded, but it's great that you're here. You made time to join us. We are very honored and very excited to have two celeb chefs with us. One, an alum that you will hear of later, and their introductions will be done by one of our students as well. Let me just say a few comments. We hope that this will become a series that we will do pretty regularly throughout the academic year with different speakers, and our wonderful Chef Hans Rueffert has volunteered to be the mastermind of that, bringing in different speakers, and we really are starting with one of the best today with Chef Virginia Willis. We're all interested in health. We're all interested in healthy eating. Healthy lifestyles. So I think you're going to hear a lot about that from our two experts. And also layered in with that, what Atlanta is going through now has a very strong culinary relevance. Atlanta is trying to become a destination city for dining, for restaurants, as indicated with now we are a city that is rated, our restaurants are rated by Michelin, and we'll be in the Michelin Guide. Isn't that exciting? Yes, and that took some work and some investment of not energy, but dollars as well. And so that is a commitment through our Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as the Georgia Restaurant Association and other groups that want to see Atlanta be up there along with New York and Chicago and other cities that have great restaurants. And we know we have great restaurants. So it really kind of comes to, a full picture, and having two experts that can talk about culinary and dining and what you eat and the whole picture. We are very excited that this event is co-sponsored by one of our student organizations, the Georgia Restaurant Organization, GRO. And joining me at the microphone is Vernice Herite Jimenez, who is the president of GRO, and she is actually going to do our introductions of both chefs. I'd like to ask you, if you would, to silence your phones because we're taping this. We'll be using it in a variety of ways in the future. So Vernice, thank you for joining us. Right over here. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Cannon, for the introduction. Actually, joining me today as well is my vice president, as Evelyn. Good morning again to everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here today with us. I'd like to introduce one of our first chefs for today. His name is Chef Hans Rueffert, author, speaker, advocate, and cancer survivor. He is known by many titles, but his favorite title is perhaps teacher. A natural-born communicator, Hans has a rare ability to inspire others to push themselves to be their very best. Diagnosed with gastric cancer in 2005, just 2 weeks after taping the finale of the Next Food Network Star, Hans traded in his celebrity chef status for his new title, The Chef with No Stomach. Never one to slow down, following his diagnosis and subsequent surgeries, Chef Hans has continued to share his talent in the kitchen with thousands. Chef Hans is motivating and engaging, and his endless knowledge and love of food, coupled with his personal struggles with post-treatment life, are an ongoing source of inspiration and interest. A proud graduate of GSU, Georgia State University, go Panthers! Chef Hans hails from Germany and currently lives in Jasper, Georgia with his wife, Amy. His cookbook, Eat Like There's No Tomorrow, was published in 2009. And now I'll have Evelyn introduce our next chef.
Good morning, everyone.
There we go.
Sorry, okay. Joining Chef Hans today is going to be Chef Virginia Willis. Chef Virginia Willis is a James Beard Award-winning cookbook author, Food Network personality, content creator, motivational speaker, and social media influencer. Georgia-born and French-trained Chef Virginia Willis has foraged for berries in the Alaskan wilderness, harvested capers in the shadow of a smoldering volcano in Sicily, and executed the food styling for a Super Bowl commercial seen by over 160 million people. That's a lot of people. Beginning in 2019, Chef Virginia lost 65 pounds and has kept it off for over 2.5 years. Her inspiring health journey with her trademark Good and Good For You recipes has been featured on The Rachel Ray Show and Eating Well magazine, All Recipes, AARP, and Women's World. A member of the La Dames Escoffier Atlanta chapter, Chef Virginia has published 7 cookbooks, including her James Beard award-winning cookbook, Lighten Up Y'all, and has literally just submitted a revision of her inaugural cookbook, Bon Appetit Y'all, which she has updated with her own food photography to be released in 2024. Overall, a fierce advocate for education, Chef Virginia lives in Atlanta and is available to travel for work.
I love that last part.
Well, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. This is our kickoff episode or event for Heart of Hospitality. And we chose that name really for a reason, because yes, hospitality is a field, right? Like technology, or it's a zone of work. But in my experience, it is also a way of life. It's a philosophy, and it really is applicable to so many things beyond just how you make a paycheck. It's how you make others feel. It's making them feel welcome, important, heard, seen. They matter. And once you sort of have that experience, it's contagious, and it becomes a way of life. And to this day, I still point with an open hand, because I learned that at Disney, because I didn't want anybody to think I'm pointing at them. So little things like that you might think are sort of trivial, or you're just checking a box. But when you see that you've made somebody's day by creating a meal for someone who's gluten intolerant, or for helping someone who's lost find their way, or suggesting to them something that's unique to the area or the region, even if you don't personally financially benefit from it, that sort of feeling that you get back, that's hospitality. So the idea of the series really is to interview people that sort of get it, that have that spark. I call them hospitalitarians. So it becomes a way of life. So when we were discussing the idea, first person on my list, I said, we've got to bring in my friend, Chef Virginia Willis, because she gets it. I mean, so yes, she's got all sorts of accolades, and this lovely book that you can see is nice and dog-eared. That my wife's like, you have to take those tags out of the book. It's embarrassing. I'm like, no, that shows that we're using the book. Yeah. So, Virginia, thank you so much for being our first guest. No pressure. This is meant to be sort of a fireside chat without the fire. They wouldn't let us build a fire, sadly. Rules and whatnot. But so that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about, number one, your journey. So in the culinary side. So I know we did a little bit of a bio, but what brought you to the table? What brought you to the kitchen? What was your spark that even got you in the door?
Oh gosh, well, there are photographs of me 3 years old making biscuits with my grandmother, and I undoubtedly that my love of food and cooking started in her kitchen. And I wish I had a photograph of this, but I don't. But she had a double sink, old country house, nice. And she had a double sink, and she would, as a toddler, she'd put me in one side of the sink and then shell the peas or beans in the other side of the sink. So I've got the 3-year-old picture making biscuits, but I don't have the 3-year-old double sink toddler chair. But that's where it all started, awesome. And food and cooking has always been just at the center of my life.
So when was the first time that you actually created food? Then, that moment where you're sort of holding your breath, going, "Or is this edible? Or is somebody going to send this back?" I mean, what was that? Did you have a moment?
Yeah, well, we were always in the kitchen with Mama or my grandmother, and I was the little kid that was, taking the Wilton classes, the Wilton baking classes, and when I was 10 years old, and I was making birthday cakes for the neighborhood moms, so little Joey would have a birthday party, and I'd Miss Lester, you want to buy a cake from Joey? And I'd make the cake and sell it, and it was sort of just spending money kind of thing, but it was really early on. Unfortunately, I did not attend GSU Hospitality Management School, and my business skills did not continue at that same rate, maybe on some levels, but the cooking and the food, it's always been there. It gives people so much joy and pleasure.
No, and that's the part that you can't really put on a menu.
Yeah.
And it's also the thing that is the hardest to train. I mean, as far as from a corporate standpoint, people always wonder, you have to smile, you have to say hello. And just to give you a simple example, this morning I stopped by the Starbucks on the way in, and I noticed I used my Starbucks card, right? And I noticed the guy who was about to make my drink look at the screen. He said, "Good morning, Hans. How you doing?" He didn't have to say my name. I didn't give my name, but he took that one little tiny second to look at the screen as he walked by, because the card obviously had the information. And you can put that in an employee handbook, but the way he did it was so seamless and so effortless. And I thought, that's a moment, and you see that all the time, and that's the kind of thing that I think is sometimes woefully lacking. And even like when you go to a place like Waffle House, you can go to 2 different Waffle Houses, and I was just down in Foley, Alabama, and had this experience. One was phenomenal, clean, everybody greeted me, made eye contact. The next, they didn't want to lift their head. And so I know it's in their employee manual to say hello, but it's just a matter of, owning the power that you have to craft and create an experience that's intangible,
Right, because people want to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
And as a hospitalitarian, it's part of our natural instinct, I think, to help people be seen, heard, and fed.
Yep.
Well,
and one of the oldest industries, the other one we won't mention, but one of the oldest industries is, your brain went there, not mine, is
farmer?
Exactly right. Well, is in the preparation, the growing, the preparation, and the serving of food, right? I mean, in Salzburg, Austria is one of the oldest running restaurants, and it's not just because they have great food, it's because, again, they've curated this experience. And I think that's so applicable across all industries. So you have had quite the resume, I guess, of working with, we always roll our eyes at the name celebrity chef or whatever, but was there anybody that you worked directly with that you kind of maybe got that spark from, that you saw what they were doing and thought, that's something I want to emulate?
My first job cooking in a professional kitchen, other than making pizzas when I was at UGA, my first job in a professional kitchen was as an apprentice to Natalie Dupree.
Oh yeah, I love her.
Who used to be based out here in Atlanta. And my first job in a professional kitchen was as an apprentice in her TV cooking kitchen. So that was really, I think, more than anything, like, wow, this is a job?
Yeah.
This could be a job. And so Natalie, undoubtedly, what I always think about with Natalie is she's the person, like I talk about my mother and my grandmother and making biscuits and the double seal sink. Well, Natalie was the one person that basically took me out of my mama's kitchen and exposed me to things that I had never seen nor heard, and certainly made. I'd never made puff pastry.
Right.
I had never, Mama made what we called patty shells growing up, but that was like a pre-made thing that she made a lot of things, but not everything, like puff pastry. My mom didn't make puff pastry. Sure. So I learned things like that. So Natalie undoubtedly was the person who took me out of my mom's kitchen and exposed me to this entire world of food and cooking.
She also has such a natural grace. And it's funny you mention her because, my history grew up in a restaurant. We literally lived above in an old hotel. In the old hotel rooms were our bedrooms. So our commute was 13 stairs down into the kitchen. And my dad was almost a stereotypical sort of gruff German man. And it's not that he didn't enjoy it, but he was so stressed out. He was the cook for the entire restaurant. Mm-hmm. And so I saw cooking as this very stressful, high intensity. But I grew up watching Natalie Dupree. I grew up watching Yan Can Cook and The Galloping Gourmet and those, what's his name? Justin Wilson. Mm-hmm. And they had such
I
guarantee. I love how we always had a little for the pot and a little for the chef. But they had such a natural grace and ease. And it wasn't about their presentation skills as a television presenter or whatever. It was just their connection with the food, and they were also talking to me. They had that they had that rare gift of they're not talking to the lens, they're not talking to the camera crew, they're talking to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a hard thing, but I also attribute that to their hospitality upbringing, because they aren't reading a script. I mean, there might be some words on a teleprompter to remind them, what they're doing, but they're having a moment. And having seen you on television, you absolutely got that from Natalie Dupree. I mean, you brought your own, but I mean, that has been transferred in that you have such an ease and a grace and a comfort level in what you do. And I think that, again, only can be from that hospitality training. Now, we were talking kind of beforehand of, hospitality, obviously to a point, you're trying to make everybody feel at ease, but there are moments where, despite your best efforts, you hit a snag. And so you
can guarantee on a snag.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a snag, especially when you're dealing with people's likes and dislikes. And my medium rare, even though that's a temperature, not a color. If it's the wrong lighting, and somebody will argue, and at some point you have to say, you'll do your best. Have you had any of those experiences that kind of made you question, what am I doing? Like, have you had those moments, like, why am I even, I'm trying, I'm hitting the wall, what am I doing? Any you care to share, I should say?
Yes. I was going to say I had coffee this morning, not a whiskey. Won't be telling too many details. Actually, I have what made me think of this when you said that. So after Natalie went to culinary school, wound up in France, and working for a woman, her name is Anne Willen. Mm-hmm. And Anne Willen had a École de Cuisine La Varenne originally in Paris, and then it was moved to Burgundy. And it was in a 17th century French chateau in the Burgundian countryside. It was really like working at a little inn. And Anne is one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. And I have worked for Martha Stewart and Natalie Dupree and a lot of, folk. Anyway, Anne was a bit particular one day. And I was,
That's very true. I like how you say that. A bit particular.
And I remember walking, and she and I was just about to explode. And I walked into my room and I flung open the doors and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? And I look out the window, and as far as I can see, are sunflowers, because I'm in France, right? And it slapped me in the face like a hand. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
Right? And so all that aggravation and her particularness was there to teach me. And I'll never forget that vista as long as I live, right? And that moment of how it happened, that I was so fed up and questioning what I was doing and why I was here. And then and then what comes to me is this vision, like one of the most beautiful things you could see on earth. And the fact that I can cook is what gave me that sight. The opportunities it has created, but you also have to harvest those. It would have been real easy not to.
Yes, and it's easy to overlook them. And people talk about silver linings, and I always kind of say that to mine silver, you have to literally move tons and tons and tons of earth to get to the silver.
That's a
and
good
so
analogy.
The silver lining just isn't there. It's not like something look, it's silver. Sometimes you have to dig deep to find that silver lining, and you have to have those moments of getting slapped in the face.
Yeah.
And I know that through my health history too, that there are moments that it's amazing how you can complain about the weather, and then when you're hospital bound for 7 weeks and you wish you could smell the rain, kind of a thing, right? So the things that we take for granted. And I don't want to go too far down that hole, but I definitely in hospitality, there have been moments where I have felt, and I know others have as well, that I have given 140% of my soul to make you happy, and you're not meeting me there. And so I think that's always in this industry, in the hospitality as an industry, it's a tough, you still have to have self-dignity, you have to have self-respect, and there are lines that we don't cross. And I think earlier we were talking about it's service, not servitude. I think too often this industry...
Not everybody gets that memo, though.
Oh, that's true.
Not all the customers get that memo. So we as hospitality professionals, as you know, of course, we have to be solid in ourselves to be able to accept what someone else isn't seeing or feeling, right?
Sure. Well, and I did an internship when I was here at Georgia State with the Disney Corporation, and as I mentioned earlier, and they go above and beyond, but even they have their limits. Even this multi-billion-dollar company, they have their limits to a point where, look, we've done everything, we've checked the boxes, and you're just, at some point you can find the people that they're just fishing for a free meal or a free experience or whatever, and that's not who your market is. I mean, you're from this area. You remember Rich's in Atlanta. My grandmother worked for Rich's. And they had the best philosophy is you don't make your rules based on the 2% that will abuse those rules or those policies. You do it for the 98% that are your demographic, they're your clients, they're the ones you're trying to make happy. And I think too often, I've seen it in more and more restaurants, they don't want to do smaller portions or share plates or whatever because that's their policy. But when you have somebody that is trying to lose weight or that's got a health restriction, and you become detached from the human experience, and you're going looking at the policy, you just lost your hospitality card to a degree.
And I've never understood that, to be candid. Like, a chef is all on her high horse or his high horse about not wanting to make pasta for the 10-year-old, hell, make the pasta.
Make the pasta.
Charge them $25.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, this is a business.
Yeah.
So we're here to make people happy, but we're also here to have a business.
Yeah.
And so, hospitality, I think, is something that has to be innate if you want to be in this business, and at the same time, it can come freely without coming free.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I want to transition to health a little bit, and I'll do so by sharing one of those stories. We had a young man come into a restaurant that I was consulting with that had all sorts of medical issues, and the chef there basically was just saying, no, we can't accommodate these things. I live about a 5-minute walk from the property, and so I knew I had vegan cheese slices in my daughter's vegetarian in our fridge, and he wanted to have a specific dish or whatever, and the chef said no, and I said I'll make it happen. So I literally ran to my house, got the ingredients, came back, and that family said we've never had a restaurant go so far out of the way to accommodate him. And that little boy afterwards said this is the best meal I've ever had out. He was 10, 12 years old. And so yes, we made 10 or 12 bucks on the kids' meal or whatever, but that wasn't the important part.
But the payoff is much
The payoff
greater.
was that this kid felt hurt. And it's the same, again, it's so easy to say no, but when you switch to that yes, and it might be yes, but. So like my dad's philosophy was if somebody comes in and wants a walrus burger, the answer is yes, but it might cost $10,000 and it might take me 6 months to procure the walrus, but the answer is yes, but. And so I think that's always kind of a good way to make them feel like that they're getting what they want without actually getting what they want. But so again, I wanted to use that story as kind of a pivot point, talking about health, because obviously I've had some health issues. I had stomach cancer, been told 3 times that I'd be dead by morning, which just goes to prove how stubborn I can be. Don't listen well to instructions. Thank you.
Wow, that man.
So I'm still kicking it, and I know you've had a health journey, which is amazing, and it has changed for me. The focus, it's a role focus on, instead of looking at food necessarily for the fat and the flavor I'm now looking at every ingredient as an opportunity. So I'm questioning, why am I using white flour instead of chickpea flour? Is it because it's easier and cheaper, or is it because it makes the dish better? Or is there an alternate that I can use? So talk a little bit about because obviously, especially being French trained, it's all about fat's where the flavor is, and it's all about it's more about the health is maybe 5th or 6th on the line, but it's not usually the first priority when making a dish for the average professional kitchen.
True. Now, so Southern born, French trained, lived and worked in France, and over the course of a bunch of years, I wound up unhealthy and unhappy, and it had a whole lot of reasons to do lots of things that we don't have time for this morning. But over the course of a couple months, about a year actually, I lost 65 pounds, 70 pounds, and I've now kept it off 3 years.
Wow. Fantastic.
So thankfully not with any challenges like you've had. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think a lot of times it's like, does it taste good? And my philosophy has shifted to what I call good and good for you. Because people think, oh, well, you lost weight, you don't eat cake anymore. Well, hell no, I eat cake. Why wouldn't I want to eat cake? Yeah. And so, I mean, my expression is like, eat the damn cake. So I'm probably going to get in trouble for cussing so much, Debbie. I'm sorry. We're in an adult school, not a children's school.
Right,
okay,
that's right.
That's when it happens. When I start using these words at the elementary school, they get so excited.
And you wonder why they didn't ask you back.
I know. Yeah. But I think that's this misperception, and it probably has this like all or nothing like American philosophy that we have. It's like just seems like we're just like, wow, let's go. And I'm a big believer in it doesn't have to be both. So my first book, Bon Appetit, y'all, is a lot of French recipes from my grandmother and recipes from my mom. Now I'm updating this book, but I have to tell you, there's a lot of food in there that I eat, that I've always eaten, that I ate when I was heavier, and now I'm still eating when I'm a lot lighter and healthier, right? I mean, food is not the enemy.
Right.
Food is not the enemy. It's like how we sort of consume it. So, and then to the thought, like people think like French food and it's like, it's butter and it's cream, and well, yes, it is if you're in Normandy, And if you're in the Mediterranean, then it's olive oil and tomatoes and olive and things like that. So French food is not unhealthy. Southern food is not all unhealthy. It's a matter of perspective and balance.
Sure.
And I would only say that even 20 years ago or something when I was there, like I would see more people. You could see more people with health challenges in the Target or the Walmart parking lot in 5 minutes than you would see an entire year in France. Right? I mean, it's really different. When you go to other countries, you can see that the American diet and our relationship with food is a lot different than a lot of places.
Well, to me, it had to be a paradigm shift. I mean, it took a health, because I was about 60 pounds overweight. And again, I lost about 90 pounds, and people say, wow, you've lost so much weight. What's your secret? I'm like, well, it's highly effective, but I wouldn't recommend it. So obviously, I not through my own, steam did I lose so much weight. But I have to eat like a diabetic now, and so I always tell people that, what's the best bite of dessert? It's the first bite, right? Because it's the whole law. So if somebody orders dessert, I'm going to have my first bite, put the spoon down, and I just had the best bite of the whole thing, and I'm done. So it took a nutritionist basically saying to me, look, food is fuel, and everybody knows that on some level, but that kind of makes it a little less sexy to call it just food is fuel, because we want to have the fat, the unctuous, the intangibles of what makes this great, and when you reduce it to just being fuel, it sort of takes some of that away. But after losing my stomach, I'm going to lose it. It's probably in a jar in Texas somewhere, but after my stomach was removed, let's put it that way. It took a nutritionist basically saying to me, look, you used to be a diesel, and now you're like an electric hybrid. And if you keep putting diesel into that engine, it's not going to work.
Right.
And so really kind of getting that analogy is what made me realize that, hey, look, it's not only the type of fuel, it's the amount of fuel, right? I mean, so like you said, overeating, it's part of our culture. When you go to, and I don't want to villainize any chains, but some of these chains their whole reputation is based on they give you a mountain of pasta that no human really could eat or should eat that much pasta at one time. And it looks impressive and people take photos of it, but if you finish that, you will feel miserable. And I think that connection between what we eat and how we feel, whether it's immediately or whether it's the next morning, is often kind of lost on us. We get so engaged in the moment and we don't get the signals that we're full immediately when we're actually full. And how many times have I pushed back from a table and I wouldn't stop eating until I was absolutely miserably full. You know what I mean? Almost like a food coma. And I don't miss that style of eating. Now, yes, I have some eating challenges, but I don't miss that feeling of just walking away from the table. My body is doing everything it can to try to regulate. What are we going to do? It's in crisis mode, trying to figure that out. And I think if we can be a little smarter about eating, and so I love the way that you've approached it. That you're not villainizing food. You're not, so eat the damn cake. I love that because maybe don't eat the entire cake.
Right, exactly. I think that's it.
Maybe get a cupcake.
Right.
And eat the entire cupcake.
Right.
So I think we also have this innate food guilt. We were taught to clean our plates. And I think that's kind of an unhealthy relationship too, because we would get this guilt, and my mom is still very guilty of this with my youngest Heidi. She wants to refill her plate again and again and again because food is love and sharing, so that you equate that as part of the whole transaction.
But I think if you are a operator of a restaurant and your job is to sell that mountain of pasta, then sell that mountain of pasta. It's not, I think that and it's okay for someone to have a mountain of pasta occasionally, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it's just I think that food is not the villain,
right?
It's our relationship with food and all those things. But I think that what is so great about this industry is that there's so many ways to offer that hospitality, to offer and to let people make their own choices,
sure.
Right?
There was a trend in the 90s, which was, in my mind, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, the 90s? But there was a trend where people would ask for a to-go box when their food landed. And then they would immediately take a portion of that food, put it in a to-go box, set it to the side. And I'm seeing that happen more and more. And quite honestly, I do that. So when I did have my surgery, they gave me a little card that sort of allows me to order off a kids menu. Well, 99% of the time, I don't want to order off the kids menu.
You don't want McNuggets?
No, not interested in that.
And macaroni and cheese and it's all yellow food.
That's
the
right.
kids menu is all yellow and brown food.
Shades of beige sometimes, yeah. So I've never used the card saying, hey, I don't have a stomach, can I order? But so I order, plus I love the experience of dining out, so I'll order the meal, ask for a to-go box, portion half of it up, and that way I know I physically can't overeat, but I'm seeing that happening more and more where people are going to that, because oftentimes that is your breakfast the next day, and put a fried egg on it, it's breakfast, or eat it the next day for lunch, or even divide it into portions throughout the rest of the day, whatever the case is. So I think that's a trend that I'm proud to see coming back, and a lot of places are even advertising that you get some for now and some for the next day or whatever. So in the post-COVID world, I mean, anything to get guests back into the dining room, I think is a smart move. But yeah, I've had to change my relationship, and I was just in Barcelona for the first time, and the idea of tapas, what a brilliant idea! You can order small plates, and you feel no shame or guilt because that's the way of eating. And if you feel like you can eat something else, you can order something else. So,
but I have to tell you, sometimes I love that trend as well because you get to try lots of different things. But I think it's also, it's also like going to a food festival when you like wind up going to a table and tasting, and then another table and tasting, and another table and tasting. Like I find that like either I'll find that I eat more than I normally would, and yet I don't feel completely satisfied.
Got it.
Right? Because I'm eating up 2 bites here, and then 2 bites here, and then 2 bites here. And so it really does wind up being this sort of amazing thing, because it perception, and maybe it is that I'm not like sitting down at a table and having that experience.
Sure.
And part of that is that, part of dining and is that experience.
Oh, I love it. Even when I was in the hospital, I wasn't allowed to eat for 7.5 weeks, but I would still go pushing my IV pole to go sit in the cafeteria with my family while they ate, because I wanted to be, and people thought, well, that must be like cruel for us to eat in front of you. No, I want to be at the table. And I think that whole experience is not just about what's on the plate, it's about who's across from you, the stories you tell, and sometimes, you can get into politics and religion and things get heated, but ideally it's a coming together of minds, and I think most of my best memories in life have been around a table.
Yeah, sure. And then like what Debbie was saying about or Dr. Cannon was saying about the Michelin coming to town, I had an experience last week where a chef was asking me about getting nominated. I don't know how he thought I knew, but I knew a little bit more than he did. But it's not, Michelin restaurant stars aren't solely granted on the food. Michelin restaurant stars are granted on the china and the silver and the service and the way that the phone is answered, and certainly my pleasure. And it's multiple things. What's on the plate is only a small piece of what is going to allow for that recognition. It really is a complete sense of hospitality from every aspect of it, and the whole entire team is what allows that award to be won.
I love that you brought that up, because you're exactly right. And I'm sure everybody in the room has had that experience. Dinner was great, but dinner doesn't necessarily a great meal doesn't necessarily bring me back to a place. You know what I mean? If I didn't feel comfortable or welcome, or if you go to a place and there's 6 empty tables and they make you wait 45 minutes because they want to run a wait, you know what I mean? If that whole experience, to me, I will go back again. I'll drive, in our hometown, we have 2 Waffle Houses, and one of them's phenomenal, the other one's not so phenomenal. And it's not, the food is exactly the same. Blindfolded, it would be the exact same meal. But I feel welcome. They take that second to acknowledge, ask how you're doing, or remember your name. When we first started the podcast that I do called But I Digest, the general manager recognized my voice, and that was the weird first time somebody said, "Oh, I listened to your podcast." I'm, whoa. But he didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? But it's little things, or he recognizes people like that. Taking that extra time doesn't cost him anything. He doesn't get paid more for doing that, but it makes his job more bearable, and it makes me drive 50 minutes out of the way to go to that Waffle House. Those kind of moments.
You were seen and heard.
Yeah.
You were seen, heard, and fed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's funny when you do become sort of indoctrinated into the hospitality lifestyle. I craft it even when when I travel, if I see people struggling to take a selfie of the a couple, I'm like, let me take your picture, And first, there's always that no, like people don't want to like, why are you approaching me or whatever, because there's that weird human bubble, like why are you talking to me? But once I do that, and then they're like, wow, that is odd. Like the fact, but I learned that from Disney, is when you see somebody that, this is, when I worked at Disney was 93, so it's not like everybody had theirs. So they had an actual camera. So trying to take a picture of yourself was not an easy thing. So
right.
you identified those moments. And I'll do it even in restaurants where I don't work. If I'm out having a meal and I see a couple, I'm like, hey, do you want me to take your picture? Is it date night or whatever? And the fact that people feel seen and acknowledged, and that creates a moment, and that is such an easy thing to do in any industry at any time, and it's not for me trying to get a bigger tip or whatever. It's creating that experience, and once you are empowered with that, like I said, I think it becomes a lifestyle more than a job. So
yeah.
Any I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a go-to restaurant? I'm not even talking fine dining. Like if you want to go out to eat somewhere, is there like a couple of restaurants in Atlanta that you think
I love Miller
Union.
I love Miller Union.
Yeah.
I love Miller Union. I mean, I have tons of friends, as you do, and I'm sure y'all do too, in the industry, but I think they do a great job at Miller Union. I love the way that Stephen cooks.
Yep.
I think Neil, the front of the house, is exceptionally well run. It's a comfortable space. It's so there's so many great restaurants in Atlanta, but often when people ask me where I go out to eat, it's Beaufort Highway, right? Because I want that exposure to things that I don't know how to make.
Yep.
And I want to learn different foods, and it's always inspiring. And then let's be real, right? Eating out is expensive.
Sure.
Eating out is expensive, and I love Miller Union, and I know that food is valuable because Stephen is paying his workers a good wage, and he's paying the farmers an appropriate fee for their food, and good food costs money, right? When you get $7.99 all you can eat, you can only imagine where that food is coming from. Somewhere, Will Harris from White Oak Pastures it's being paid for somewhere.
Yep.
It may not
There's
be
a
being
cost.
paid for on your plate or your check, but if you're getting cheap food, someone's paying for it somewhere, and more than likely it's the labor. And it's more than likely someone brown who's not being paid a good wage.
Sure.
So, but without going down that path too far, I mean, I love, we have so much here in Atlanta, right? With all the different populations from different places. And, when I was writing my last book, Secrets of the Southern Table, Korean Americans are moving from New York and LA because the cost of living is better here in Atlanta. The Indian population in Decatur and DeKalb is one of the greatest percentages of Indian Americans in the country. Like, we have an incredibly diverse city. People hear Atlanta and they think fried chicken and biscuits and sweet tea, and it's not. It's burritos, and it's all this kind of, it's a lot of different things. So
yeah, and the things that are like Hankook, I guess is the one that it's like fusion taco with it's Asian inspired street tacos and whatever.
Right.
It's fantastic. And then with all the Syrian refugees that we had, I mean, obviously there was a horrible humanitarian crisis. The city adopted so many Syrian families, and that whole cuisine, and I'd never had Syrian food before.
No.
And so I love, as you mentioned, going to Beaufort Highway with no expectations and putting yourself in an uncomfortable, I tell my kids this, is that life happens on that border between comfortable and uncomfortable, right? So if you're always on the comfortable side, you're a couch potato and you aren't growing, and if you're always on the extreme uncomfortable side, well, maybe you're a daredevil that has a short lifespan ahead of you, jumping out of planes and whatnot. But if you can be on that line of comfortable and uncomfortable, leaning into the uncomfortable, pushing yourself a little beyond that, that's where life happens. The first time you got invited to lead an event, or it's nerve-wracking, it's uncomfortable. The first time I was asked to speak in front of a group, you're questioning everything. But then once you put yourself out there, you grow, you learn, you get the confidence, and you can do those things.
I know. I always say this, like when I speak for groups of students or things, whether it's culinary or otherwise, my suggestion is always raise your hand, volunteer to strain the stock. You can only get to do things if you do them.
And ask the question. I mean, I think that sometimes, usually if you have a question, there's a great chance that somebody else has that same question or a similar question. But people are nervous to raise their hand and ask the question. But usually if you do it, it's a catalyst. Then everybody wants to start. Then they feel comfortable that they can ask a question. And so to that end, I mean, let's make sure that we allow time for that to happen. But if we have questions, because the two of us can sit here all day long and talk food. There was one other thing I wanted to. So we're going back to the Atlanta area restaurants. That is the thing to me. Again, it's not about. You mentioned price. I 100% agree with you that you're going to pay for that experience one way or the other. And I don't eat out often, and oftentimes, especially in this industry, we know what the food cost is. We know what you know what I mean? Like we know, and oftentimes when I read a description on a menu, I have already in my mind sort of created it. Like I have an expectation, and too often when I go out to eat, and it's not that I'm a snob, it's just that meal falls slightly below that expectation. But that's okay as long as the service is there. And the one that I was going to mention is, it's no longer here, it was Junction or JCT, Fort Fry's place there. I have never had a bad meal in the entirety of its existence, but to me it was more about the service. They were so gregarious and not in a checking a box, sometimes you'll go and you know that there's a script that they're reading and it feels like a script, and other times that people just genuinely get it. And I felt like that was an Atlanta institution. And the Optimist does a good job.
Ford is a great example of a really great restaurant group, that they have a good culture. And the food is good no matter how high end or low end the outlet is, and there really is a culture there. And I think that whether it's a locally owned group or a nationally owned group or a international conglomerate, it really does have to do with the culture.
I think Danny Meyer is a great example of that with Shake Shack, and in fact I read his book before Shake Shack was a thing, but he's done a great job, and that's a top-down. Culture is the right word. You can't necessarily only hire for that, although occasionally you will hire gyms, but that has to be trained, it has to be acknowledged, it has to be celebrated. And all too often you see places that it might be in their handbook, but they're not celebrating or helping to curate or craft those experiences.
Well, not only that, I would say a culture isn't something that can be written into a handbook. A culture, I think, is built by the people that are hired, right? It's a living, working thing that's always growing and changing.
Yeah, I love that. It's a people-driven industry, and we're serving people. But and again, you and I were talking beforehand about Horst Schulze, Ritz-Carlton, and now Capella. The whole attitude of Ritz-Carlton, that we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, to me is one of the most brilliant mission statements, because it empowers that person, makes them feel a part of the equation, because one couldn't exist without the other.
I think that certainly my pleasure is one of the greatest ways to respond to someone in hospitality, and that's what they say at the Ritz-Carlton. And I don't know this from being an oft guest at the Ritz-Carlton. My partner many years ago was a cater waiter there. And it's ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and every guest request is met with the answer, certainly my pleasure. And how gracious does that feel saying it, and how gracious does it feel hearing it? Yep. And even, people want us to be seen and heard. Yep. That's just where it always goes back to.
Well, and using that example, and Disney did this to a degree as well, Ritz-Carlton a little more, is each employee had an allowance with which they could correct the situation. So if somebody had red wine spilt on their dress, they could immediately offer to pay for the dry cleaning, knowing that management's not going to say, well, I'm not paying for that. You know what I mean? So they had a dollar amount, but with the reality being that if they went above and beyond that, I'm sure they wouldn't get the firing squad. But they were empowered on an individual level, so that not only gave them permission to do the right thing, they didn't have to question or second guess their decision. That management was going to back them up. You do whatever it takes. If you have to, call an Uber for somebody because the parking garage gate wouldn't lift or whatever, do it. Make the experience happen, and we'll deal with the rest later. I think that's again applicable to any industry. The culture of yes. I think was born and bred and raised and fed in the hospitality industry.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to switch to some questions. I know we have some folks that want to ask some questions.
If you have a question, if you could just go up to the mic, so we'll be sure.
Yay, good. Hope y'all are enjoying this.
Audience participation. I noticed that nobody sat in the front row that, like, this is SeaWorld, like, that's the splash zone you were worried about. But.
So my first question would be, since you guys mentioned you both have experience in food media, like television, or both authors, what is some advice you would give to students who are interested in pursuing a career in food media, such as that?
A career in food media. Well, I said my first job working in a kitchen, professional kitchen, was Natalie Dupree's television test kitchen. And my very first job was unloading groceries, right? And probably my second job was washing dishes. So the advice to that, what's so awesome, it's over there in my purse, but everyone has a film crew, everyone has a camera, everyone has audio, I mean, varying degrees, like right there in their hand.
In their pocket, yep.
Yeah, so I think that now the playing field it's not only like more level than it ever has been before, but doors are wide open. You can be seen by anybody. So my advice for that is the same thing that I would say if I were counseling a client. It's really all about branding and consistency. One of my favorite people on earth is Dolly Parton, and she has an expression that is find out who you are and do a good job doing it. So it's like if you have an idea for something, or if someone has an idea for something, like just keep honing in on it and ask all the questions. Like if you want to have a podcast about fried chicken, then just keep, is this going to work? Does this make any sense? And you know what? It may not, but you won't know unless you try it. And so my advice is, I can guarantee you may fail, but I can guarantee that you'll fail if you don't try. So that's my number one thing, is you just got to raise your hand and try.
To that, I would also add, expanding on that, is be yourself. Mm-hmm. So the year that I was on the Next Food Network Star, we actually had somebody apply who looked like Rachel Ray, sounded like Rachel Ray, and said she wanted to be the next Rachel Ray. Mm. We had someone who talked like Paula Deen, looked like Paula Deen, and wanted to be the next Paula Deen. Be you. There isn't another you. And so I think oftentimes they'll identify with somebody and they think, that's who I want to be. But there already is that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you've honed out this wonderful intersection between Southern French, right? But that's you. It's not like you sat down in a think tank session and thought, what hasn't been covered? You took you and you stayed on that track. And I think too often there is this sort of culture. They'll see somebody, the guy who does salt like he's a puppeteer. That's his thing. So now everybody's doing this thing. I'm talking to you. Okay, that's not how you. Or I see the Lindt chocolate commercials with the guy with the tall hat who's using a whisk like that. I've never used a whisk.
No
one
would ever use a whisk.
Like what? Well, yeah. What?
That
what
makes me crazy.
What is that? So
makes me so crazy.
So don't be afraid to take what your passions, and if you're not there yet, then you keep honing and finding out what that is,
right,
and then stay on that track.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, so the first question was asked, so now pressure's off.
Other questions?
There's don't be afraid of the microphone.
Hello. Okay, so my question is for Chef Virginia Willis. So, Chef, you mentioned how you moved to France and you worked there for a while. So I just wanted to know, what was it like leaving the United States, moving there? Was that your first time, really leaving the country and living somewhere else? And how did you adjust to the culture there? And how do you feel like that impacted the way that you view your area of work? I know it's kind of loaded, but
wow. No, the biggest advice I would give next to raising your hand and trying anything is just go and see and do and taste and eat and work as far away from where you're from as you possibly can, because eating other people's food and cooking and being with other people will educate you. It opens your mind like nothing else. One of my first memories of being in France was laying face down on the bed, crying my eyes out. The ATMs weren't working. This is my ATM card wasn't working, and I'm literally like, what am I doing? I just will never forget that. What am I doing? How am I going to get out of this? And I did. And it's it's not going to, okay, I've got all my fingers and toes still. I'm okay. You know what I mean? I'm not dead, and and it's just try, just like I said, if you don't try, you won't do anything. So France was tremendous. And I've often said that the French R and the Southern accent do not go well together. And I'm not completely fluent, and I'm definitely not now. I had a working sense of French. I did study French before I went over. Like, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to do it and then go do it. Oh, I'm going to be, it doesn't work like that. Life doesn't have the magic wands. But what you can do, and what I do suggest do, is like, if you want to go and work in a bistro in Hong Kong, you're not just going to go get a flight to Hong Kong and like show up in Hong Kong. You're going to do a little bit of research. You're going to find out what the restaurants are. You're going to find out if they do take any internships. You're going to find out if what languages are necessary. You're going to find out like what requirements. So it's like what I do with everything still to this day. I want X. Okay, how do I get to X? What's the path? Like, what is going to put me in the best chance to success to get to X? And so I just try to, always set a goal, get there, set another goal, get there, set another goal. But working and being somewhere else where you are completely unlike everyone else around you is the greatest gift that you can possibly give yourself, because it educates you and enlightens you in a way that nothing else can.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I love that. Get outside your comfort zone.
Yeah,
It
for
makes
sure.
you grow. That's where growth happens.
Yeah. Come on up.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, this is a question for both of y'all. I was wondering, what is one thing you wish you knew before entering the food and beverage industry?
You take that one first.
Well, so again, my answer's a little biased because I was raised in, genuinely born into the restaurant. Both of my parents were lifelong hospitality veterans. But again, I wish I had learned that it could be fun, because I watched it from the inside out, not seeing the impact necessarily that it made on other people. So yeah, I guess that's sort of interjection of fun. But I think that's with everything that you approach and any task that you are given. There's a way to make it fun. And so I'll share a little analogy. I was with my dad. He was German, and we were in Munich. It was snowing, and we were eating in a cafe that overlooked a little plaza. And there was a gentleman out there who was emptying a sewer line. So it was freezing cold. He's literally has the shittiest job in town. And he had all those yellow 1980s Walkman, the waterproof type, and he was jamming. He was having the best time, and he was moving that vacuum back and forth, and he was literally removing human waste from a tube. And so my dad pulled me over and he said, "You see that guy?" And he said, "This is possibly, arguably, the worst job in the entire city, but he is making the best out of it. He is having a blast. And he's cold, so he's moving and he's dancing and he's singing, and he has the worst job in the city." So he said, happiness is not a person, place, or thing. It is a decision. And so whether you're peeling the potatoes,
Right.
what seems like an endless mountain of potatoes, make it a game. Make it something fun. Challenge yourself. See how many I can knock you out. So whatever the situation, there is a way. We talked about the silver linings, to find a way. There's some bright side to this, even if it's figuring out what not to do in the future, that you're learning something at every step of the way. And so that kind of insight, I wish I could tell my younger self, that all of this stuff that you think is grunt work, mopping the floor, shucking oysters or whatever, is a step towards, you mentioned the mountain climbing kind of a thing. That's how you get to the top. It's not a straight line, right? It's base camp to base camp to base camp. And sometimes it's back down before you go up. So yeah.
Thank you.
I would think that my answer to that would be, and y'all are really setting yourselves up for success with this, I think that my answer to what do I wish I knew before I entered the hospitality industry is, I wish I knew more about business, frankly, because I went into it because I love to cook. I went into it because I'm a writer, and all the emotional reasons, and emotional reasons are not always best business decisions, right? So I think that that's something that I was a little late to the game. Now, I say that, I worked in corporate America for media companies, and I've had my own business for 20 years. But a lot of it's been like, oh, let's go do that. Oh, wait, that looks fun. Let's go over there. And so maybe some of the strategic thinking I was a little bit late on. And so that's, I think, would be my answer. But it's never too late to correct, right?
Good
Keep
point.
going till you did.
Thank y'all.
No, that's a great point. When I purchased our family restaurant from my parents in 2009, it was for all of those heart reasons.
Right.
And even though I graduated from a business school, that isn't where my passion lied. You know.
Right.
And so it's okay to find someone whose passion is numbers and
Right.
partner with that too. And I think Ford Fry is an example of that. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
He has a business partner that allows him to play in the kitchen and do what he does best.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We hope y'all have enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was fun.
Thank you both, Chef Virginia, Chef Hans. You know, Hans, when we first got together and you had this wonderful idea and you said, I want it to be like a conversation. I want it to be just free flowing. And we really truly felt like we were sitting in your living rooms, just talking as friends. Thank you for your openness. Thank you for sharing life experiences. Let's give them a huge
Yay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much. And we have some tokens of
Yay!
appreciation.
Go Panthers!
Our wonderful students,
Yay.
Desiree, and of course Bernice is back.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Here,
Thank
come
you.
see this.
Thank you.
Let's get a picture.
Yeah, picture. Yeah. Here we go. Come on in here.
We got
Thank you,
social
thank you,
media,
thank you.
hey, take care of.
That's right. That's right. We got a post. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Well,
This obviously takes a team to put together, and so I want to thank some people. Josh Grothier, thank you. Every step of the way, Josh has been part of the planning. Extremely, extremely important, and thank you. And Chow Wen, our business manager, is here, so she pays the bills. We spend the money, she pays the bills, so we like that. I do want to point something out, and Virginia, I know that you will probably give a support to this. Chef Virginia Willis is a member of La Dame's de Escoffier Atlanta. They have wonderful scholarships, and one of our own students here, and Evelyn was one of their top scholarship winners year before last, right? And I just want to mention that because there are students here. These are scholarships for hospitality students. You don't have to be in a culinary school for nutrition, hospitality minors, and I think, Chef Virginia, that we give some of the best scholarships.
Oh, yeah,
out
go
there,
get that
so-
money.
Yeah, go get the money.
Go get
So-
that money.
Yeah, so
I got a scholarship many years ago that
That's
helped
amazing.
put me right here in this spot right now.
Yeah,
Go get that money.
Chef Willis has a story about how that really did help support you in a big way. So we encourage you to look for those kinds of resources and go for them, because we
Yeah.
really have success stories. And Evelyn, I'm glad you're here, and just to say this is kind of the next generation of what you
Yeah.
started with your scholarship.
Yay.
So I think that both chefs are going to be around for a few minutes if you want to come up and talk. And we appreciate our nutrition people being here, special guests, and thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful Friday.
Thank
a
you so
wonderful
much.
day. And thank you. Thank you, chefs.